Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar. Every other Tuesday, I invite fascinating people from around the world to share experiences and knowledge that will help us create affordable, equitable, and sustainable cities. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, where as commissioner, I led the design and construction of over 200 parks and took a small program called Ciclovia, Open Streets, and increased it to over 120 kilometers, 75 miles of car-free streets every Sunday and holiday, where more than 1 million people walk, bike, run, shop, enjoying the presence of each other. 17 years ago, I created 880 Cities, a non-profit organization based in Toronto, Canada, where I live. Last year, I ran for mayor and came second with 100,000 votes. My aim was to change the conversation in creating a Toronto for everyone. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities in all continents, sharing and learning. Based on all experiences, I developed master classes and keynotes customized to each city. But Cities for Everyone, the webinar, is a way of giving back. It's always free and hopefully always interesting. Please invite others to join us every other Tuesday, anyone who cares about cities and people, equity and sustainability, about all living older, healthier, and happier. Amanda, how are you?
I'm doing great, Gil. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Thank you, everybody. Amanda and I, we've been working together for over 17 years. Since this was a very small organization, just practically the two of us. So we want to talk to everybody about 880 cities. And we're going to talk about the concept, but also the organization and the kind of work. So the way we are going to move is, first, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for about 8 minutes on my background and how 880 began. And then Amanda actually, she started as almost the second staff that I hired. And then she worked, and then she went on maternity leave. But she was so valuable that I said, Amanda, please, even if you're on maternity and you're no longer a staff person, could you be part of the board? So she was a board member. And then afterwards, when I left the position of executive director, we appointed someone, and that person was living on maternity. And then I thought that Amanda would be the best person to be the new executive director. And I'm sure that you're going to agree with me once you hear her presentation. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Today, I'm speaking from Argentina, from Santiago del Estero, in Argentina, and we have people from Argentina today. That's wonderful. I'm working with smart cities. This afternoon, I was saying before we started the formal webinar that as soon as we finish this, I'm going to go with the mayor and her team. We're going to visit public places, parks, streets. There's a magnificent river, the promenade that they're building along the river. We're going to walk and bike, and we're going to evaluate the infrastructure. And the next couple of days, I'm going to be focused on smart cities. Nothing as smart as creating cities for people. It's technology for people, not people for technology, but we'll talk about that at another moment. Today, we're going to talk about 880 cities, the beginning, where it came from. So part of it is my life before coming to Toronto. I came to Toronto for 2 years. And I love Toronto, and I fell in love with Canada, and I decided to stay. So now I've been there for 24 years. My first time in Canada actually was in 1976 as a high school student. And that was because they were organizing. Canada hosted the World Conference on Human Settlements. Up till then was the largest ever conference organized by the UN. And I was there as ending high school because I was lucky that my father was in charge of it. He was Under Secretary General of the UN, like the #2 level of the UN, in charge of this conference. And actually, yes, there was another Trudeau running Canada. And it was very interesting, and I learned so much, and I got bitten. And my father visited over 90% of the countries, inviting the presidents and the ministers to go to Vancouver for this conference. And maybe we were bitten by that because my brother and I were there, and afterwards he was mayor of Bogota twice. And I've worked in over 350 cities, so maybe it was Vancouver, maybe it was Habitat, maybe it was a little bit of both. My mom was a landscape gardener, also an artist. And so I've been involved I've been somewhere or another with people and cities all my life, and equity and sustainability. Before coming to Canada, I was commissioner in Bogota. Bogota is the capital of Colombia, about 8 million people. And I there as commissioner, I'm going to tell you only about two projects, parks and ciclovia, or open streets. I led the design and construction of over 200 parks all over the city, small ones, big ones. This was one of them. The Pope came, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then he left and nothing happened. Nothing happened in 27 years. Why nothing happened? Because change is hard. In Bogota, or Asunción, or Buenos Aires, or Copenhagen, or Tokyo, or Toronto, or anywhere, because you try to change and the cave people show up. Who are the cave people? They are the citizens against virtually everything. I'm sure that every one of you, the hundreds of people that are connected today, you have those cave people, but don't take no for an answer. We gotta find ways how to find that little crack through the window and run through it. So it was like this for 27 years, and in 4 years, we turned it into this, a magnificent park for people of all ages and all backgrounds. And it's very, very well used with innovative issues such as running and walking past, and things that you can do by yourself and others in groups. And it was still today, it's probably the best urban park in the country. So we were able to do it. In the following term, one of my brothers became mayor, and he built this magnificent library in one of the corners of this park. And it was great. But again, it's not only about these nice big parks, but of the 200 parks that I did, almost all of them were in very poor areas, very low income. And people said, Gil, why are you doing so many parks in the poor areas? The poor people need so many things. I say, of course, they need education, they need health. But also when the poor people really feel miserable, it's in the leisure time, So the low income people need to have better parks and sidewalks and bikeways and public transit. Everything public has to be better. So that is something that was critical. Also, I found a small program of only a few kilometers and a few thousands of people. And in 4 years, we turned into the world's largest pop-up park. What is it? This is, oh, I love it. Actually, last Sunday, I was on it. I enjoyed it. Every time that I go, it's like my fourth son. I have a son and 2 daughters. This is my fourth one. You open streets to people, you close into cars, and the magic happens. This can be done anywhere. 121. By the way, whenever you can do things in your city, do it as fast as possible, because then maybe nothing happens. Today, since the year 2000, so in the past 23 years, we don't have 1 single meter more. We still have 121. They have taken 1 here and added 1, but it has not increased. So whenever you can do anything in your city, do. We need doers all over the place doing things as much as possible. And the open streets is really magic because it's about this, children and adults. I was maybe in the back of my mind, 8 and 80 was somewhere there. And it's something that can be done anywhere. All you really need is have streets and people. So if your city of 100,000 people, of 500,000, of 10 million, if you have streets and people, you can do it. Do it. Young, old, rich, poor, everybody comes. In Bogota, 1 out of 5 people every Sunday and holiday. Over 1 million people every week. Why is this important? Because it changes minds that the streets are public space. They belong to everybody. The biggest public space in any city. And it can be done whether it's the largest cities or New York or whatever. It's about social integration. You know, this is the biggest export of Colombia, of Bogota. It's, when we began in Delhi, in India, they didn't have any. Now they got more than 50. And Paris does it 52 weeks of the year. We meet as equals, and that's really, really powerful. Tell your decision makers that this is low cost. All you need people on streets is low risk. We're not building arenas or gymnasiums. And the benefits, wow, the benefits are endless. So I think this is something that is interesting. By the way, when my brother became mayor and I provided advice initially, 280 kilometers of protected bikeways. When look at the level of poverty, extreme poverty, and look how it can be transformed when you dignify people with really good sidewalks and bikeways. But you know, you see the street for the cars, nothing. Why? Because there's not enough money for everything. So you need to prioritize either the street for the cars or the protected byway and the sidewalks. We need to, one is going to be safer. Two is about dignity, safety and dignity. We need to dignify people that walk, people that ride bicycles. And it was one of the goals. And then there was a whole lot of bike lanes all over the place. Imagine when these were being done, there was not 1 meter of protected byway from Alaska to the Patagonia, not one. And then, of course, not perfect, but they got a lot of things done. Now, when people see it in Paris and in New York and in Montreal, they want to do it. Well, imagine this, and this is a very poor city compared to cities in Canada or North America or Europe. You know, 540 kilometers, over 800,000 people. I mean, to put it into perspective, 850,000 people before the pandemic, now even more, is more than the total population of Copenhagen. Not of the cyclists, of the total population. So 850,000 people is a lot of people. Is probably more people cycling than any emerging country, any emerging city in the world. But all I'm saying is that it's doable. And post Bogota, I decided to live in Toronto, and I created 880 cities and cities for everyone. And I've been able to, lucky to have worked in over 350 cities. I started working for a city. You know, you go to Canada, they don't give you work if you don't have a Canadian experience. To get Canadian experience, finally I worked for the city of Mississauga, like 10 levels down from what I had in Bogota, but it didn't matter. I did my best. But I got bored with the bureaucracy and I wanted to do more things, and people started inviting me around the world to provide advice. So I left, and a little bit out of advocacy, that's where 880 Cities began, because I wanted to go to city councils and speak and so on. So instead of speaking on behalf of Gil Penalosa, I was speaking on behalf of 880 Cities. Yeah, I do these webinars every other week, and they are free, and you can watch all of them, and also the master classes. Yeah, I ran for mayor last year in 2022. Of course, it was a totally different. No one wanted to run because the mayor was too powerful, had too much money, including a girlfriend, which he resigned a few months ago because of that. So now Toronto's going through a new election.
Every child deserves a safe place to play. Every human deserves to have nature close to their home. Every person deserves a safe place to walk. Every cyclist deserves a safe street to ride. Every homeless person deserves a home. Every immigrant deserves a chance. Every senior deserves the care they need. Every indigenous person, every Black person, every person of color deserves equal rights and equal opportunity. Everyone with disabilities deserves equal access. Everyone in the LGBTQ community deserves our respect. Every minority deserves admiration for the journey they've taken. Every person living in poverty deserves a path out. Every one of us deserves a mayor.
Okay, it was so different, and I didn't even have any signs, so I asked people to put up signs, and people did beautiful signs all over. I'm so grateful to everyone who did it. It was my main assistant, my main inspiration, my grandchild. Some people even put shirts on their dogs. It was great. But everywhere I've been, in the 350 cities, people say, well, Gil, what's 880 cities? Well, 880 cities is not really, it began as walk and bike for life. But people didn't understand that what I meant initially, walk and bike for life, is for life had a double meaning, that it was to be life, to be healthy, to live longer, and also for life for always. It's not just when you're a child or not just when you're adult, but always. And when Amanda came and started working with me, we went all over. It was we started getting a lot of grants from the Ministry of Health Promotion, and then in order to eliminate that lack of clarity of walk and bike for life, people thought we were just doing master plans of walking and cycling. We changed to 8 and 80 cities. And then we went through different variations. Initially, it was very linked to the walking and the cycling, different logos. But I want to clarify, it's not about parks or streets or walking or cycling. Those are the means, not the end. The end is really how can we help create successful cities? And I love looking at the venues where I'm going to speak. Here I was in Warsaw, and I went the night before. Imagine, I was thinking, how am I going to compete with this? All people dancing, and I was going to speak there the night after. And then this is the DJ Vika. You know, the people that are making most businesses around the world are people from 60 to 70. The second segment is 50 to 60. But anyway, 880 is about that, about healthy communities and healthy communities where people are going to be happier. And now people always say, Gil, can I send my child walking to school? Can my grandparents ride to get eggs or milk? It's simple. It's like the rule of 880, common sense. Unfortunately, common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. Step one, think of a child, someone around 8 years old that you love. And once you have that child, your child or nephew or neighbor, or whatever, think of an 80-year-old that you also love, your parents, your grandparents, your brothers, your sisters. And once you have the child on the other adult, step number 3, would you send them across the intersection? Would you send them walking to school or to take public transit or riding their bike in parks? Would they feel safe? If they would, it's because safe is safe. If you would not, it's because it's not, and we gotta do it better. What if everything you did in your city, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the building, the restaurant, everything, the libraries, everything had to be great for an 8 and an 80. It's not 8 to 80, it's 8 and 80, because the 8 and the 80 is just an indicator. Because if we create everything that has to be good for the 8 and the 80, it's gonna be good for everybody. From 0 to over 100, we gotta stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. And we gotta build great cities for all. That is the simple but very powerful concept of 880 cities. Communities for all. So if in your city they do a crosswalk or a bike lane or a park or private sector businesses, if they're not good for 8 out of 80, tell your city leaders that's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's not about creating a Disney World for the 20 to 50 healthy and wealthy. It's about everyone. And honestly, I'm so lucky to have Amanda here. Amanda is an amazing person. She has been with me throughout this. She wasn't there the first year, but ever since, in very different roles. And she has a lot of clarity, so she's gonna talk. I talked a little bit about the past, reaching to the present. Amanda's gonna talk about the present and the future. And by the way, afterwards in the survey that you get right after the session, we are asking, where do you think we should go from here? Amanda, thank you very much for being the main guest. And if you have any questions, people, please, the question is open. The dialogue is more than me asking Amanda a question, is the people in the audience sending questions, and Amanda and I will try to answer. Thank you, Amanda.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gil. That was such a wonderful introduction and some really great memories there with those old logos. I am so honored to be able to share the Zoom stage with you. We don't often get a lot of opportunities to be together and talk about 880 cities together. We're often in very different places, sharing the work that 880 cities does and the inspiration behind it. So this feels like a really big treat, and excited to share some of the things that 880 cities has been up to over the last, I'm focusing more of my presentation on the last couple of years. I've been the executive director in this role now for 5 years, but as Gil mentioned, I've been with the organization for a long time, lots of great memories. And I have to tell you, as someone who's worked with Gil for 17 years, what you see is what you get. And this is one of the things I love about working with Gil, like this energy and enthusiasm that you see in the webinar, this is what he's like all the time. and it's infectious, and it's definitely impacted me in terms of how I see cities and my passion for cities. So I'm always so grateful for his mentorship and collaboration and partnership. He's always been very supportive, and we don't always agree, but I think that's what really makes our relationship work and our collaboration work. And a big part of the success of 880 Cities, it's always rooted in this mutual respect and an alignment on the big things that matter around equity, justice, and creating cities for all. So I am joining you all today from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, which is including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations. And I am going to talk about 880 Cities and our mission, which is in the title of this webinar, which is to ignite action and challenge the status quo to create healthier, more equitable and sustainable cities for all people. And as you saw what Gil mentioned, so much of that is tied to Gil's story and his inspiration coming from Bogota. And we've really aimed to sort of continue that legacy of using public space as a driver for improving social equity and improving healthy, equitable outcomes. And the way that we achieve our mission or advance our mission is by bringing people together to transform mobility and public space. And of course, as you know, we are guided by this simple, but we think powerful idea that if everything we do in our cities is great for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, then it's probably going to be better for everyone. And the reason we talk about age is as Gil said, aging is a universal human experience. We are all aging. We can all think of that 8-year-old and that 80-year-old and build some empathy and understanding. At the same time, we know that age is just one dimension of how people in cities experience inequity. There is absolutely ageism in our public realm and how we design our public realm, but there is also multiple ways in which marginalization and oppression intersect depending on one's social location. So there's also, when we think about race, our gender identity, our ability, these are all what we think about when we're talking about creating cities for all. It's the 880, but also thinking beyond how that opens up a whole conversation about who we're designing our public realm for, who we're managing our public realm for, who we're creating great public spaces for, and who's being left out. As an organization, we have been around for 17 years, which means I think we have a pretty unique position in terms of our role and our mission and how we advance our mission and our kind of theory of change. We really learn from a strong international network of collaborators, which is very much connected to a lot of the work and great exposure that we've had to work and privilege to work in many different cities in all continents. And we really focus on strengthening the capacity of leaders. And when we say leaders, it's from all the way from grassroots community change makers to senior elected officials and public sector staff. We think we need everyone involved in creating these healthier, more equitable, more sustainable cities that we are striving to achieve. We demonstrate change with transformative public space projects, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, and really diving in through that 880 lens. What does it look like adopting that 880 lens so that people can actually experience it and imagine what their city could be like if we actually changed and thought of our cities in different ways. And of course, we also create actionable tools that can be used by communities of all shapes and sizes to strengthen local advocacy, placemaking, and inclusive city building efforts. We are guided by these sort of three rights, so that we have the wonderful 880 concept, but what does that mean? What are sort of our three kind of pillars that define our work? To us, it's really about reclaiming the right to the city for everyone, as Gil mentioned. And this to us is really about reclaiming the right to the city, especially those who have been disproportionately negatively impacted by a disinvestment in public space and an overinvestment in car-centric planning. And these two things go together. So it's really about, again, challenging that status quo about who really has the right to move in the city, to enjoy public space, and to participate in city building efforts. So we're going to walk you all through the 3 rights that really define our work and are central to how we conceptualize the city and who has the right to the city from a sort of human-centric point of view. So we believe everyone should be able to freely move within their city safely and comfortably by walking, using bicycles, and riding public transit, because those are the sustainable modes, and that everyone should feel safe on the streets. And as Gil mentioned, this is really about thinking about those multiple identities and multiple social locations, and designing for dignity, safety, and comfort for everyone in all seasons. The way we design our streets is instrumental in creating those equitable cities that we desire. Some ways that we actually put this into action, because action is a big part of our mission, is doing demonstration projects like the one we did here in front of a school zone. This is what a typical school zone looks like in morning drop-off time in Toronto. And we thought, well, what if we actually just reclaimed that space and put children's needs and caregivers' needs who are walking and biking to school at the center? What if we just closed the street during the morning drop-off and the afternoon pickup for just 2 hours of the day? Our streets function 24/7, really prioritizing car movement in most of the streets in Toronto. But what if we just took 2 hours out of the day and said, this street is going to be putting children at the center? So we rolled out the red carpet and said, this is a space for children, and centering their needs and their play and their walking to school. I love this picture. It's one of my favorite pictures. This girl in the red coat, look at her face. You can see that she understands, I think in this moment, at least this is what I think, that this space is for her. The streets are our largest public spaces in our cities. And so reclaiming them is so important in terms of creating those equitable public spaces where people can connect, they can be physically active, they can hear the birds. One of the biggest things from this project was you could actually hear the bird song at the walk to school and the pickup, and children played. Another great example of how we've done demonstration projects around the rights and mobility. This is Danforth Avenue in Toronto, one of the largest commercial streets in the city. And we transformed with our partnership with Better Block, this street that really operated much more like a car highway into a more complete street that really embodied the city's vision and policy around Vision Zero. And we wanted to demonstrate that you could take action with a lot of community effort and volunteers. And we transformed this street in less than 24 hours from what was before into this vibrant street with a separated cycling facility and a vibrant sort of cafe space and spillover for the local restaurants. Similarly, inspired by Bogota Ciclovia, we've done open streets in many North American cities. Toronto is one example. It hasn't taken off as to the scale of Bogota, but again, demonstrating what we can do with these wonderful public spaces, which is our streets, if we actually use some imagination and thought about centering people's health and well-being. This picture reminded me of the one with the little girl who feels so excited about the street being hers. This gentleman stopped and had his coffee and donut in the middle of Bloor Street, which I think is such a great embodiment of what 880 Cities is about. So the second right is the right to public space. We believe everyone should have access to a great quality public space that meets their needs for play, for physical activity, for social connection. This should be fundamental in how we build our communities and our cities. And again, we asked the question, who are we currently really designing our parks and public spaces for? When we take that 880 lens, we realize that not only are we not really thinking about multiple ages or multiple abilities, we also know that there's huge disparity in who has access to great parks and public spaces. People who often racialized communities and low-income communities have a less park space or access to great quality park space in our cities. And this is something that we see in many different cities around the world. So we strongly believe that every person should have a great park, not just a park, a fantastic park or public space within a 10-minute walk. We've done some great work with our partners at AARP in the US and produced some wonderful publications. Again, I mentioned about actionable tools and resources. These are all open resource tools to sort of promote thought leadership on placemaking and inclusive public spaces. So we have the Creating Parks and Public Spaces for All Ages. We also have the Winter Placemaking Guide, how to activate public spaces in winter. We also, in 2021, released a guide on inclusive practices to addressing homelessness in parks. This is an issue that's been around for a long time, but was even further exacerbated during the pandemic, and how we can adopt a more human rights-based approach to management of parks and public spaces for our neighbors who live in tents. And of course, the latest guide we did with AARP was around creating community gardens, which is a great, we've seen a lot of great movement on people sort of coming together to build great community gardens in their neighborhoods and their communities. And this guide highlights some of the good practices, and is also, we're working with AARP to provide some granting opportunities for communities interested in doing community gardens. Another great example of how we advance this right to public space is through demonstration projects as well. I wanted to share, this was a project coming right out of the pandemic. In 2022, we worked with the city of Kitchener, which is a city in Ontario. We worked with the Parks and Recreation Department. This is the downtown, the pink circle. This is right in front of City Hall. The downtown has a lack of green space, and the city was also really interested in actioning some of the engagement they heard from the community on their parks and public space master plan. So they had all this great engagement data. They'd been listening to the community, and they wanted to demonstrate and test some ideas. And that's when 880 Cities came in, and we did the first pop-up park in downtown Kitchener. This is right in front of Carl's Air Square, in front of City Hall. Again, it took us about, I think it was like 35 hours overall to install this new pop-up park, which had not only a really cool play equipment where children could come and play right in the middle of a traffic stop. And this is intentional. We want to sort of change mindsets. More of these demonstration projects is not just about what is permanently changed, and the legacy that we're leaving in the community is the idea that things are possible and that we can actually reimagine these spaces. Interestingly, this was a partnership with Earthscape Play, who do these wonderful play structures. There was lots of kids who came and used the play structure, but we had the biggest increase in play were for adults. Adults want to play too. We don't often get the opportunity to do so in public space. We also heard from community that they wanted more nature-based play opportunities, so we demonstrated some of that, bringing some of those loose parts play. We heard from the community they wanted more cultural representation in the space, so we partnered with Muslims in Public Space to do some Islamic art installations, just chalk art, but you know, just working in partnership with community, not only to build out a demonstrated space, but also program the space and activate the space in ways that actually build a sense of belonging and connection to diverse communities. We also we heard from the community they wanted places for ceremony and Indigenous ceremony. And this is Indigenous Elder Gerard Sagasigi. He's an elder firekeeper He ran a Sacred Fire during the installation, which was wonderful, and did a wonderful welcoming ceremony. It was great. The fire was burning over the course of the 3 days that we had the installation in place. And it was a great gathering spot. This was done in October, so it also kept people warm and cozy, and lots of people having good conversation around the fire. We also heard from the community. We did some outreach to the Muslim community, and one of their biggest fears was that the parks and public spaces didn't actually have or feel welcoming for prayer or connection to their spirituality. They didn't feel comfortable praying in public space. And so we worked with a local imam to actually conduct the first ever public prayer in front of City Hall, which felt like a really powerful thing to be a part of. Some of the key data points, there's tons of data that we collect always from our interventions, but I thought I'd share some of this because this is what helps us build the case for further investment in public spaces as this great equalizer that Gil talks about. So, over the course of the pop-up, we saw a 700% increase in physical activity, 400% increase in people hanging out in the space and lingering in the space. 30% of the people surveyed discovered a new business. If that really is connected to that lingering piece, people stick around, they start to look, oh, there's a store here. Oh, this, I didn't know this was here. We get that a lot during a lot of our public space activations. We also saw a 150% increase in children in the space in the evening. We always look at like the different times, and there's sort of a lack of children present in public space in the evening. The pop-up park created an inviting space at night. And 70% of folks surveyed said that they played in the park, which I think is pretty great. Another project that I wanted to share was also coming out of the pandemic in the summer of 2022. We worked in downtown Brampton, similar process, engaging community, understanding what they wanted to see in their downtown public spaces. And what did the community want? They wanted free activities for children and families. They wanted pop-up markets. They wanted culturally diverse art and entertainment, health and wellness activities, and opportunities for community togetherness and learning. And we worked with the city of Brampton and the downtown Brampton BIA to identify a location where we could test some of these public space activations and transform public space. Vivian Lane was identified as an opportunity. The downtown integrated plan, downtown Brampton is going through a lot of construction, so they have a whole strategy around meanwhile spaces. What do they do during the construction? How do they activate existing assets in public spaces? And so Vivian Lane was transformed with this beautiful mural from a local artist, with lots of great family-friendly programming, including pop-up loose carts play. We did the first night market. We heard a lot from a lot of the cultural communities in Brampton, which has a high proportion of South Asian population, that downtown, despite being one of the most diverse places and cities in Canada, felt like really white, and that there wasn't a lot of cultural representation. And one of the things that we heard was a night market would be a really great opportunity to sort of animate public space and bring in new vendors and new types of businesses into the downtown. That one was very successful. We only did like three or four pop-up markets, but that was definitely one of the most loved activations. Again, we collect a lot of data. We saw a 242% increase in people staying around and lingering in Vivian Lane. We also saw a lot more people moving through the space. And of course, we asked people how they feel in the space. What kind are we actually increasing sense of safety, comfort, socialness, and my favorite, playfulness. So overall, we saw a big increase across the board for all of these after the activation was installed. Another great project, and I know I'm at my 20 minutes, Gil, I'm going to fly through the last bit, is the Seniors Activation Toolkit. This was a public space activation that was super simple. During the pandemic, we saw that seniors were very isolated. I mean, there's still a huge epidemic of loneliness and social isolation, not just among seniors, but in particular, we focused in on activating really close public spaces to seniors facilities and seniors homes and a high proportion of senior population. And this is simple stuff, just chair yoga to drumming classes. We wanted to think about how we actually bring some of the indoor programming outside in physically distanced and safe ways. So last but not least, which is exactly what kind of pulls all the rights together, which is the right to participate. We believe at 880 Cities that everyone has the right to participate in city building decisions that affect them. And that means really thinking outside the traditional engagement processes so that we actually bring people involved in placemaking and public space activation who have not always been at the table and who have often been underserved, like families with young children, like communities that don't have a lot of time on their hands because they're working multiple jobs, low-income communities, like racialized communities, like children who don't often have a seat at the table, like older adults who don't often have the ability to come out to a public or town hall meeting. So, again, about this questioning or challenging the status quo, we've been challenging cities on how they design their traditional sort of public consultation processes for many years, and really trying to push them that if we design a public consultation event that looks like this, that really just invites anger and probably brings out not a representative proportion of the population, we should not be surprised that we get bus stops that look like this, or intersections that look like this, or public spaces that look pretty devoid of life. We need engagement that actually outreaches and goes to where community is at, where public life already thrives, whether it's street corners or it's in the morning, in parking lots, if it's at the bus stop, if it's after school, if it's hijacking. This is me at a Latinx seniors crafting program. It's hosting tea with the South Asian Ladies Association. This is a very intimidating thing for most people, to stand up in front of a microphone. If English is not your first language, if you don't feel confident public speaking, if you don't feel like you understand the laws and policies of the city that you're working in, this is very intimidating. So we really work on creating more inclusive, accessible, vibrant, fun engagement. It could be simple things like engagement boards with lots of pictures about what people like, what kind of attracts them to the space. Everyone can draw a picture or even fill in a blank. We often hire youth ambassadors who are more sort of known in the community to do some of the more door-to-door engagement work. As outsiders, we don't want to sort of just pop in. We know there's so much strength in working in collaboration with community who have so much knowledge and capacity. And you'd be so amazed when you actually bring some fun and energy to discussion, the sort of creativity and willingness and ideas that come from really fun engagement are so much better than those sort of stuffy town hall meetings. And the design of the materials should really be inviting people to come out and participate fully in a new vision for their city. I'll just end by saying, it's not just engagement with community. I talked a little bit about change makers and leadership at multiple levels. We have a lot of programs where we're supporting young people with their ideas, both in Ontario as well as in the US. This is about fostering leaders and leadership so that they can implement their community ideas and have the opportunity to test their ideas. And this is also with city staff who we bring to different, this is a delegation we brought to Copenhagen to learn from inspirational ideas from abroad. And it can be also mayors, getting them to be a part of these activation in public space. So we really need leadership at all levels. I feel very strongly about that. And the right to participate is really the right to participate for all. So that's where I'll leave it. I've gone through the 3 rights, and thanks so much, Gil, for letting me share some of the stories of 880.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. As everybody can see, we have hundreds of people, and Amanda and I both want to share so much, that we really go over the time. But so we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. That was fantastic, Amanda. One thing that I want to remind people is this. All those pilots that Amanda was talking about, pilot is not the end. Pilots are the means to show something that people think, oh, it's so hard, it's so complicated, it's so disruptive. Well, you do the pilot and you see, oh, it was not the end of the world. And sometimes pilots don't work. So if it doesn't work, okay, you pick it up and you don't do it again. But if it works, it has to be multiplied all over the place. Amanda, I admire you so much. And also I'm grateful that you accepted the invitation. We rarely have the opportunity to talk about what 880 is. So this was a teamwork. Thanks everybody from so many countries, so many places. I'm always grateful to have you. Please do not forget to do the survey that helps Amanda and me, and also to sign up 2 weeks from today. BRT, what is bus rapid transit? What does this have to do with the city? How could this complement the transportation system that you have? Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are, and see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Gil.